Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Const. So if President Biden is going to fulfill this dream, his dream of being the new FDR 2.0, he is going to have to channel a lot more LBJ. Now, all these comparisons to history, they have limits. You don't need to be a Professor Harvey K to understand that both FDR and LBJ had the advantage of large Democratic majorities in Congress, majorities that helped them enact the New Deal and the Great Society. While President Biden is operating with the narrowest possible margin, one vote in the Senate, and the challenge of one vote is that any senator of either party can gum up the works at any time for any reason. At first, the big problem was the right-wing senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who, truth be told, aren't really with us agenda-wise on most things, whether it is raising the minimum wage or ending the filibuster. That's hard enough. But now, a second front is emerging. Senators who we agree with more than disagree with, threatening to use their power of one vote to drive specific agendas, as Senators Tammy Duckworth and Mazi Hirano did to get more Asian Americans into the administration, in which the Deputy Chief of Staff, Jen O'Malley Dillon, responded with, quote, "We have Kamala Harris." Oof, really? After some frantic consultation with the White House, Duckworth and Hirano backed away today from their threat to block Biden nominations. I'm not disputing her goal, but if every senator operates this way, the Biden administration will rapidly break down and get nothing done, which will make the Republicans very happy. But let me be clear, I put the weight here on President Biden, not on Senators Duckworth and Hirano. It never should have come to this public showdown. Which brings us back to President Biden, FDR, and LBJ. Here's the thing about politics. Politics, like life, often involves choosing whether you are going to do something just because you can, or maybe forego something because even though you can, it would be better for the greater good not to. The fact that a senator can do something is different from whether they will do something. And that is the difference Joe Biden has to work with. Any senator at any time can bring his administration to a screeching halt. But whether they will do that rests largely on whether they will listen to President Joe Biden, whether they respect President Joe Biden, whether they are afraid of President Joe Biden. The thing about LBJ was that he understood this to his long bones. He could encourage, entice, barter, and cajole. And when it came down to it, he could intimidate. In politics, fear is sometimes necessary, sometimes. Emphasis on sometimes. Andrew Cuomo. But Biden does not seem to be invoking much fear or, frankly, respect from his Senate. Even Chuck Schumer smells that Biden will do his own thing, and he's actually giving Schumer cover to go more progressive, knowing well that many of the issues he's now backing won't actually push forward because Biden won't let them. Without some fear to glue things together, Biden will not hold the 50 votes to do the big things he says he wants to do, the big things the country needs him to do. His team leaked out this week that Biden is putting together a $3 trillion economic plan. This plan includes a significant green infrastructure program to curb climate change. No Green New Deal, but it's a green infrastructure program, as well as an investment in people through universal pre-K and free college for at least, the first 2 years. President Biden's team, if it is a team, are already losing the communications high ground. Mitch McConnell has smeared these plans by calling them a Trojan horse for tax increases. Not surprising coming from Mitch, of course, but it is an early warning that we are definitely not going to have a polite debate. These major actions, these vitally needed actions, will only happen if Joe Biden can bring to bear the power of his office and his years of experience in the Senate and his relationships that he brags about in the Senate to line up 50 votes. This is basic. This is basic legislative process. And if there's anybody who should be able to get this done, it is the man who spent most of his life since he was 28 years old in Washington. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is about the use of political power to get something good done for the country, or at least your legacy, Joe Biden, while we are in a crisis. Otherwise, What are you here for? You can't just keep blaming process and the Senate and the crises. You're here to lead. If you're not answering to us, if you're not answering to your legacy, who are you answering to right now, President Biden? Maybe that's the big question. We have a wonderful show today. Helen Hong is here to discuss the rise in attacks against the Asian community and her personal story, which is horrifying. And later, Jordan Zakarin is here to discuss Andrew Cuomo, my favorite topic. But when we come back, we're going to discuss another one of my favorite topics. We have a special debate here, statehood or self-determination for Puerto Rico. It's a spicy debate. You want to stick around for this. The hot topic of the moment on our show and many other places. We are talking about the status issue of Puerto Rico, which is a big issue. It's been an issue forever, but it's now coming head to head. Possibly this is the moment, not sure, in Washington with two bills that have been presented. One is advocating for the statehood of Puerto Rico, and the other is advocating for self-determination through a convention. So I'm excited to have two friends. Really, two friends, I'll say that. Luis Dávila is a DNC member. He is a DNC National Committee man, as I've known him through the years. And he is a statehood advocate. And Federico de Jesús is a former Obama-Biden official and the founder of FDJ Solutions. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Nomiki.
All right, I'm going to go all the way in, right? Let's talk about the two bills and what they mean to you. Luis, I'll start with you because I feel like we need to give fair time to the statehood side. Explain the evolution of the statehood bill that is presented before Congress right now.
Okay, so essentially a bill was filed in Congress that would basically offer statehood for Puerto Ricans and for Puerto Rico to ratify the vote that already happened and occurred back in November, where 53% of the voters voted for statehood. I think it's the, Puerto Rico's colonial situation is the unfinished business of American democracy. And I feel as though this bill provides the vehicle that will allow for Puerto Ricans to gain for the very first time that first-class citizenship that we deserve. I think Puerto Ricans deserve a seat at the table, and to the extent that we are not represented and actually have voting power in Congress, and the people who enact the laws that affect all of us who live in the island, that is something that needs to be addressed. And this legislation that was filed in a bipartisan manner, I think it provides for the best opportunity to reach that goal.
What does it mean if this were to happen, if Puerto Rico were to become a state? What would happen next? Would the debt be eliminated? Give us some examples of how this would change.
So that's a great question. I mean, people think that statehood is something that you're just going to turn a switch on and off, and it doesn't work that way. It would have to include a transition plan that would have to address that very same topic, right? The Puerto Rico's debt burden, how it would be managed. Would legislation that currently allows for a process, bankruptcy process in Puerto Rico, how would that continue? And definitely the tax system will need to be changed, and many other federal programs on the island would also change. But I think that's one of the things that need to be addressed, especially by Congress, because at the end of the day, the buck stops there. So it's all decided by Congress under the territorial clause, and that's something that needs to be negotiated and approved as part of the statehood admission process.
Well, this process would be taking place, as a state, as all states in the union, I mean, this happened to Louisiana and Hawaii and parts of Alaska, which did not speak English first. Would the island be forced to start legislating and, everything from the courts to the legislature, would it be forced to be pushed into English?
Well, right now, we have two official languages in Puerto Rico by law. It's Spanish and English. We have federal courts operating in Puerto Rico. They already operate in English. Our state courts are mainly operate in Spanish, but they also allow writs to be presented in English. So it's really the language thing. I don't think it's a big impediment. I think we, as a nation in the 21st century, we're certainly, and all the cultures that are mixed in and make a part of what America is, the great melting pot of the world. I think that wouldn't be an impediment to gaining equality through statehood.
Okay, let's move forward on this self-determination bill. There is a bill that was presented by Representative.
You said we should be passionate and interrupt.
Yes. But I want you to explain your side, and then. But go ahead.
Let me actually agree with Luis in the sense that yes, Congress owes Puerto Rico those details of a transition plan of what would happen with language, right? Because the fact is that even though there are a lot of Hispanics in New Mexico and California and in other states, those states operate in English. Their state legislatures debate in English. Unlike Puerto Rico, their courts are in English and their school systems are in English and the government operates in English. So if you want equality, shouldn't it be equality for all Americans, not just the people who lived in the potential state of Puerto Rico, number one, and number two, if Congress is going to offer statehood like that bill that he described does, shouldn't that offer include the transition plan so Puerto Ricans know when taxes would kick in, what language requirements there could be? For New Mexico, there were in the Enabling Act. Yes, a sovereign state can have any language that it wants. There's no precedent for that in the US. So Congress needs to tell people what actually statehood means, and then we could make a decision. But just to offer statehood without the transition plan, it's like when Republicans criticized Pelosi when she said, we need to pass the bill and then you'll find out what's in it. So those are my 2 cents.
But Fed, transition plans weren't included in bills for Hawaii and Alaska. So why would you put another bar or set Puerto Rico for another bar? I mean, the transition plans need to be discussed and they need to be addressed by Congress. But I wouldn't detain the admissions bill because it doesn't specify all the different details on how it's going to.
You don't want people to know the details of what their decision entails? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't say that, Fed. All I'm saying is that you shouldn't delay or stop a bill because those, every single detail that you want to know and how it's going to be addressed as part of a transition is not included in the bill. I mean, first the people need to ratify the vote, and then you talk about how the United States is going to incorporate a new state, just as it did back when it admitted Alaska and it admitted Hawaii.
But you said that when they admitted Alaska and Hawaii, there was a transition plan. If Puerto Ricans don't know,
there was a transition plan, but it wasn't on the ballot. You don't have the transition plan on the ballot.
So let's. The alternative here is there is another bill, and this is the bill that Representatives Nidia Velázquez and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as well as Senator Menendez, put forth last week. So Federico, can you explain what this bill is, and does it have a transition plan?
It does. That's a requirement. And that's one of the reasons that I like the bill. Some people think it's complicated, and that's a fair point, but it has some basic elements for self-determination to be real and meaningful. Number one, it would be involving Congress exactly explaining what each option would mean and leave it up to Puerto Ricans in the politics in the island or pundits like Luis and me to spin our way through this. It should be official. It should be Congress telling us what they would offer, and then we should decide. And it also involves every representative of every option. I know Luis will say, well, people who disagreed with statehood in November in a plebiscite where he correctly stated statehood got 52.5 or 53% of the vote, they actually were voting on a non-binding referendum without knowing what statehood would mean. And therefore, to say that all options were represented in the no, it's like saying, well, Trump could have run an election. Trump, yes or no? He would have loved that. A little bit unfair for the Biden folks. So I think self-determination should be inclusive, it should be binding, and it should involve all sides. And that's actually closer to the Biden position, even though he said he preferred statehood. The White House said that another referendum should be held, and it should be a fair one.
Just to be clear, so folks know, when Biden was asked about the position of state, he said, yes, I believe it should be a state, but there should be a fair process where all parties have a stake in the matter. That's his official position. So let's talk about these plebiscites, because there have been many. And they're all non-binding, as Federico says. This last one, while it was 52.8% or 53% of the voters who voted on a ballot, said yes or no to statehood, it was still very low turnout and was not representative of all voters on the island. Luis, I mean, the UN, this is their procedure when they're looking to decolonize territories or kingdoms in the past, for instance. They want to make sure that the vast majority of the citizens, the residents on the island or on a location, are in agreement about an issue. 53% with 30-something% turnout is by no means the vast majority. So how can you go in and use that as the reference point to Congress members who may not be as, sophisticated in understanding the dynamics of the island?
The first thing we need to address is the turnout issue. It is constant and uniform with what the last election was as well. Not the last plebiscite, but the last general election, and that's because of federal court decision ordered the voter rolls, let's call it, to be inflated or to include people that either have been deceased or have moved out of Puerto Rico. The voter rolls haven't been updated in more than 15 years, I think.
Well, how many of those people are there? I mean, is this like when the Republicans say, dead people are on the ballot, and then you find out it's like one person in all of Wisconsin?
Not on the ballot, but on the registry. So the number that you're using to come up with the 53%, or the number that has been determined to come up with the 53%, or the whatever the rollout, the turnout that you mentioned, it includes people that were registered in the rolls back in, I think it was 2005 or 2006. So there's a lot of people there that have moved out of Puerto Rico that are probably deceased. And they're being used as a denominator when you divide and try to take out the turnout percentage. So the turnout is really higher, and it's really uniform with what has happened before in the last general elections. The reality is that 53%, yes, it's a number that, to me, any politician would dream of winning any election by 6 percentage points. That's a landslide in any election. When you think about it, President Biden was elected as president with 49% of the vote, and he is the president.
Against
and no one is questioning.
Against an actual thing, though. There weren't two ideas. It wasn't like Donald Trump ran against not Donald Trump, as Federico said. And also, that's an election. That's different than, okay, this is my future. This is every single aspect of my life and my history and my blood. And do I have to learn English or not English? Or, I mean, all of these different aspects. This is the UN's, how they configure whether or not.
Okay, has the UN opposed the fact that Great Britain left the European Union? Have they opposed that, or have they said that wasn't? Because that happened with 51%. This is even higher than that one. I mean, elections matter. Elections have consequences.
So they weren't determining. They were determining whether or not they were leaving an arrangement. The UK was not beholden to the EU. They were tied into many measures, but they weren't a colony, essentially, of the EU. They determine their own laws. There's no fiscal oversight board.
I understand that, Nomi, but it was still a self-determination exercise. So, I mean, we're going to talk about what percentage works in one self-determination process and which one is not. I mean, it should be the same bar.
Let me agree with Luis again. I don't really like the whole argument, even though I'm not a statehood proponent. I don't like the turnout argument. I prefer to use the argument that it was exclusive of other options, and it's not Federico de Jesús saying it. It's the U.S. Department of Justice saying it in 2017 when there was a referendum, there was a boycott. And
yeah, Trump's DOJ, let's remember that.
Yeah, quoting Obama.
Let's get to that. Okay. All right, we only have a few minutes, but I want to get to this. So speaking of Trump, co-chair for Latinos for Trump presented this. This is your resident commissioner who identifies with the Statehood Party. How do you feel, DNC member Luis Dávila, the Statehood Party that right now is many members on the island today are defending conversion therapies? How do you, DNC member, feel about this party being the major carrier of this mission on the island and on the mainland?
Well, I like that you brought the conversion therapy issue, because that's something that's very hot, a very hot topic down here on the island, and that's the problem that we're having. And Federico will agree with him. The Senate president of Puerto Rico, of the Puerto Rico Senate at the moment, is not a statehooder. He's part of the Popular Democratic Party, and he has already said that they are not likely to approve this law that prohibits conversion therapy. So that's the main issue that we have in Puerto Rico. We're not able to organize politically with left or right leaning views. It's all about the political status, and then sometimes you're stuck in parties that push for a status alternative, which either Federico or I support. but we don't necessarily agree with what people within our own parties advocate for. And I think it's the tragedy of colonialism. So yes, I have a member in my party that caucuses with Republicans, and that's her right. I mean, who am I to tell her not to caucus with Republicans? That she was elected by the people. But the reality is that the statehood bill was introduced by more, not just by her, but also by Democratic members. It's actually a majority of Democrats are the ones that have co-sponsored the bill. So it's really not a Republican measure, but a measure of fairness and equality for all Puerto Ricans.
Fede.
But look, Luis is right again. The bipartisan bill that the stateholders are promoting is bipartisan, and he is right that there aren't left or right politics in Puerto Rico. I opposed the Commonwealth candidate in the last election because he was a homophobe, and he was calling gays sinners, and that's appalling. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the Senate president did vote to ban conversion therapy. He just said he wouldn't opine this time until the vote happens, which I think that he should say that I'm against it, but whatever. But here's the other point. The reality is that most of the people in the NPP, the party that's supporting statehood, there is a chasm, right? Because you can't say you're for equality, but then be a racist. You can't say that you're for equality and then be against banning conversion therapy. And most of that party approved the religious freedom law in the last time. So yeah, it shouldn't be a left or right issue, but there is a chasm between people demanding civil rights and denying them to voters in Puerto Rico or aligning themselves with Trump in the mainland. So that's the contradiction. It's not whether the island politics are left or right. It's a mess. It's not Democrat or Republican. We agree on that. But how can you say you're for equality when you support a party that denies that equality in Puerto Rico? That's the point.
And that's precisely what statehood would eliminate. It would eliminate the political party system as we know it in Puerto Rico and would bring in the Democratic and Republican Party as the parties who would elect officials to public office. And that then the issue would be resolved, at least in those terms.
But even the governor himself has said that Puerto Rico would be a swing state. So there's no clear determination of whether or not there would be 2 Democratic senators or 2 Republican senators and how many congressional members as well. So before we wrap, I want to just ask Luis. So this bill that is being presented by Congresswoman Velasquez and AOC, it brings all parties to the table, aside from the plebiscite. If your basis is, we just had this plebiscite, and many plebiscites, by the way, in which statehood has won based on certain terms, then why not just, aside from that, which is controversial and debated, why not just come to the table with this other bill? Because statehood members are included. In fact, some statehood members do support this Velasquez AOC bill. Why not just come to the table and say, let's have a debate out in the open in a democratic way where representatives equally distributed into this convention that they have can really air out every single aspect of this, and may the best team win.
I mean, I think there's room for debate, but I think the bill needs a lot of work. I mean, the bill, first of all, it opens the door for non-territorial options other than statehood independence and free association, which are the only 3 recognized options. So by opening that door, it allows for the process to even become more complicated, and potentially the convention coming up with a proposal that at the end of the day, Congress will not be able to act upon.
But that's what the negotiating commission is for in the bill, so that people know, oh, wait a minute, Congress wouldn't go for that. That's in the bill too.
But Fede, the bill says that it allows for any option other, in addition to independence and others. So it's already saying that it will allow for it. So I mean, that's just one of the other thing is, at the end of the day, after going through all this process, you end up in a non-binding referendum.
Fede, go ahead.
No, sorry. He wants equality, but not for other options. He wants to limit options. I want people to vote for whatever they want in Congress.
I don't want to limit options. I want to do something that's real and that moves forward. And the problem is when you come up with this, anything goes, at the end of the day, you're going to end up in the same place where you started. I'm 37 already. I don't want to, die and, be, I know this is going to be a year's struggle, but at the end of the day, I mean, I've lived, I've been hearing for the last 25, 30 years of my life, the same thing. And we're always at the same place. I at least I can admit that there is at least an effort to do something. But at the end of the day, what you're proposing ends up delaying, and we keep up ending in the same place that's where we started. So
democracy is listen, it's messy, but it's the best thing that we have. And if it means more democracy, doesn't that, all right. So we only have 2 minutes left. I just want to do a rapid, I'm sorry, guys, we could talk about this for an hour and a half. You should come back on. We'll do the next stage of this. Rapid fire. Last question is, there has been a bill before presented and in Congress. So why didn't it work? Why this time? Why is this time special? Fede.
Well, I mean, there's several bills that have been presented before. I think this time is different for several reasons. This bill that Nidia Velázquez and Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and all of the presidential candidates from the Democratic Party, except Amy Klobuchar, support, and 85 other members of Congress, mostly progressive, some Republican. The difference is that bill was the product of advocates, of community organizers in Puerto Rico and in the diaspora in the United States that wanted some change. It wasn't a product of a political party in Puerto Rico who have dominated the debate. And I'm for opening it up for the people. And I think this is the chance that we have. Hopefully, if the White House commits to the thing that they promised the voters and provides leadership, maybe something could happen. And I think that advocates are pushing for it. And I think that's a great thing. And I agree, Luis, this could be improved, and that's what the legislative process is for. The main reason we need self-determination is that Congress has never offered it. It should be binding, it should be inclusive, and it should be fair. And if those elements are in there, I'll be happy to support it.
Luis?
I think there is an impediment for Congress to come up with the options and define them. I think it's their responsibility, and you can come up with a bicameral commission and bring in people from Puerto Rico and even have whatever election you guys want to have. But I think Congress can really define this. And at the end of the day, one of my main concerns of that bill is the fact that after going through everything about the congressional delegation and the options and whatnot, it still leads to a non-binding plebiscite and non-binding referendum to the people. So, again, it doesn't tie, the results of that whole process is not binding. I mean, so.
As is the plebiscite, by the way, which is your basis.
As is the plebiscite, but the plebiscite was a local law enacted by the Puerto Rico legislature. We're talking about Congress's responsibility, and this is a congressional bill. So a congressional bill should have a binding clause, and they tried. I mean, I read Section 7 of Velázquez's and AOC's bill, and they tried to make it as binding as possible and to tighten it up as much as possible. But at the end of the day, they can't do it. It can't be binding because if you don't define the options, if you leave it out in the open, there's no way to make it a binding plebiscite or question. So I think at the end of the day, Congress needs to gather everyone, come up with the options, celebrate as many hearings as possible, and then let the people decide and let's vote directly.
Fede?
No, the bill says that Congress shall approve what the people support, but we can tinker with the details. Congress has never done this. Congress has approved or been close to approving plebiscites that are federal, like Luis says, and they've never gotten to third base. Puerto Rico has also done non-binding plebiscites that haven't resolved anything. Let's try something different. It doesn't have to be this idea, but let's not keep doing the same thing all over again, expecting different results.
Well, back in 2012, I believe, or 2010, the House passed legislation to move a federally sponsored plebiscite. And the only reason it failed was because it failed in the Senate, and the opposition of the statehood opponents, all they did was include the territorial option. Things have changed. I think there is a window there, Fede, to have, to replicate that same strategy that happened 8 years ago and leave the territory behind.
Well,
Good point is
options in this bill. So yeah.
The thing is things have changed for both of these bills. There's a pathway for both of these bills. I think that's fair enough. I'm really glad you guys came on. Hope to do this again. I would do this regularly. This is so much fun for me. All right. At least they're friends. We're all friends. Federico de Jesus and Luis Dávila, thank you for joining us today. I'm sure we'll have round 2 very soon.
Thank you, Nomiki. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. So excited to have Kim Kelly back. She is a labor reporter and journalist. She writes a labor column for Teen Vogue and is a regular contributor to The Baffler. And you have a piece out right now in Rolling Stone about workers at an indie music company beginning efforts to organize secretly, because that's how you have to do it, right?
Of course, you can't let them know what you're up to because they'll try to stop it.
But you're writing about it. So what is that going to do?
No, well, this is actually a coordinated effort. These workers reached out to me last week saying, hey, we're organizing. We want to get this out there. We don't want the boss to know about it, obviously, because we haven't told them yet. So we actually coordinated very closely when it came to scheduling. Like, I wrote it up really quick and the editor reached out for comment really quick, and then we waited for them to put out their statement. Then we're like, boom. It was like a very I woke up at 7 a.m. to make sure this all unfurled the way that the workers wanted it to, and we pulled it off, which I'm very happy about, and so are they.
This is incredible. I mean, so how does something like this go down at an indie music company? I mean, I assume it's not a very large company, so does that complicate things?
That is definitely something that came up when I was speaking with the workers. I interviewed a bunch of workers about it, and they were all in the store. They all asked to be anonymous because it's such a small workplace. Some of the people I spoke to, they're like, look, I'm the only person with my job title, they'll know it's me. So it seems like their biggest concern was retaliation. And maybe not so much I'm going to get fired, because that is ostensibly against labor law, but more insidious things like, this is the music industry where who you're friends with, who who you talk mess about, like, that matters. Like, if you piss off the wrong person, that could have an effect on the rest of your career and the opportunities you get. So the fact that it was so small made it a little bit more interesting, but it's still the same process. Former union is former union. It's just all the other factors that kind of get thrown in there.
So what does that mean? Like, it's why did they decide to form a union at this company?
So they told me, which is it's really interesting to me, because they cited a bunch of events that have happened recently, and this is kind of a concrete response to them. They mentioned, the racial justice uprisings over the summer that really struck a chord. They mentioned what's happening here in Bessemer with the Amazon workers trying to organize. They mentioned, developments on the government level of Biden being so, making all these pro-union messages and about the NLRB shakeups. It seemed like it was kind of a perfect storm. And they're also dealing with workplace issues. The company they work for has expanded very rapidly. And of course, that pressure has fallen on their shoulders. So it sounds like all this stuff swirled together, and the answer for them turned out to be union.
What union are they working with?
Is OPIU, I think it's 47 and 147. I'd have to double check. There's a lot of OPIUs, but it's like the office workers union, and professional workers. And there's a precedent there because they already represent administrative employees at Warner Brothers and some of the big major labels. But this is definitely a first for the indie music space.
That's very cool. So while we're on that topic, because I think we get this question a lot, and it depends obviously on the workplace and what type of where you work, what kind of industry it is. But how do you go about, if you're working at a company and you want to start a union in that company, what are some initial steps that workers can do?
Right. Well, I mean, the first thing you should do is to reach out and talk to your coworkers and make sure you're on the same page. Because if just one person wants to form a union and everyone else is like, no, then that's not really going to work out. But once you talk to your coworkers and have those one-on-one conversations and get a sense that, like, okay, people are interested in this is something we need, we collectively want to fight for, then often it can come down to something as simple as just Googling, like, what's the right union for you? Like, seeing what other similar companies have unionized, which was unions. I mean, even here, just to come back to Bessemer for a second, the RWDSU, the union that's representing this union drive, that was found because a worker just kind of Googled, like, what union should I try to join? Like, how do I form a union? And they came up, and he did what everybody should do. You email the union and the representative gives back. You start talking. It's all about forming relationships and talking and communication at the very beginning, right? Because you have to make sure you're on the same page, because that's how you build something strong.
Fascinating. Okay, so it's as easy as that. Google, look it up. Unions are receptive. I've been in that role before, by the way. It's daunting.
It's not super easy. It takes a lot of work, but the steps are simple. Making it happen is the hard part.
Yeah, reaching out to your coworkers, and understanding if you're in a workplace that you could actually unionize too. I mean, there's lots of other factors. Okay, so let's talk about Bessemer. You're on the ground right now, I assume?
I'm holed up in my hotel room in Birmingham because there's a tornado warning.
Oh my God. Again, another Alabama.
Again, this happened. I got here on Wednesday when Sarah Nelson came down, and there was a hurricane warning there too. I think I was one of the last flights to get in, and I got out and I was like, oh, this is different. Okay, there's a lot of sirens. There's a lot of red on the map on the TV weather, but everyone who's down here was like, oh yeah, that happens. So I'm like, okay, I guess this is fine.
Stay safe. We'll be watching you carefully. But all right, so where are we in the process? Workers are voting. The campaign's underway. The election's underway. Any updates?
Well, we're getting down to the finish line, right? Monday, the 29th. That is the last day that you can get your ballot in. And after that, they're going to start counting. Like this coming week is going to be it's going to be like the equivalent of kind of the presidential election we just had, where everyone was expecting a big result right away. And then it was like, no, it's going to take a few days. This is going to take a few days. But there is still time right now for workers to get those ballots in. So there's still this final push. There's a lot of community support. We just had a rally here the other day. On Friday, tomorrow, we have, talk about a dream team. We have Senator Bernie Sanders, Killer Mike, and Danny Glover are all coming to town to meet with workers and to support them and just be like, union, yes. Danny Glover's been here before. The workers love him. So there's a lot happening, but it's kind of more that sense of, okay, we did all the work. We're just waiting for hopefully the victory party. There's just a few hurdles in the way because there's going to be legal challenges. There's going to be the issue of counting ballots, challenge ballots. I'm not even entirely sure which day we can expect a result. Nobody knows. It comes down to the count. So it's all very a lot of butterflies in the stomach, as Jennifer Bates said when I interviewed her.
How many people are voting or are expected to vote?
So can vote. Every person who's eligible, 5,800 workers are eligible, and the ballots were mailed out. Now, not everybody received their ballot because, as one of the organizers was explaining to me, folks move around. They might not have up-to-date information. There have been returned ballots. There have been a few hundred ballots that haven't made it to people, but there are also thousands of workers involved, and every ballot counts. But it seems like, and this is just from conversations I've had, it seems like they expect a pretty good turnout. The organizers seem very positive about the results. There's not a lot of cynicism here. I know that, you take everything with a grain of salt. You never know what's going to happen, but people seem more excited than worried, I'll say.
Sarah Nelson, the president of the Flight Attendants Workers, part of CWA, she had a video come out that she posted of the facilities and how the elections were being conducted and what was against the NLRB rules. Can you describe some of that to folks? Yeah,
I was there with her. We went out there. We maybe some light trespassing, I guess we'd say. But there was the day. So it was the day that we got there because there was a tornado happening. All the workers were sent home because
the tornado pushed you in there. You had it was safety.
There's a lot of wind. We're not very big. we ended up in an Amazon parking lot where we could kind of get eyes on what was happening up there. And one of the biggest, obviously you'd see in the video, there is this mailbox. And we've been chasing this mailbox store all week. There's a mailbox that was placed there by someone, Amazon, USPS. There's a lot of questions about this mailbox, but there's a mailbox there with a big tent around it with some weird Amazon propaganda on it where workers have been encouraged to drop their ballots. That via text message, via signage, Amazon really wants them to put their ballots there. And now we don't know who has the key, which is kind of a important part of that. We don't know who's picking up the ballots, who's able to access them, and we can't get a straight answer. That's something I'm working on right now with More Perfect Union. We should have a video coming out pretty soon with some pretty. So it's been an interesting story, right? But in the broader sense, Amazon is still pushing their anti-union campaign, still pushing anti-union propaganda. I'm not a labor lawyer, but there are certainly all sorts of things I would point to if I wanted to make, the accusation that they were union busting or they were not quite coloring within the lines, we'll say. Yeah, they're always up to something. It's Amazon.
So this is and I want to ask you more about the PRO Act in a second, but we're living in a situation right now where there are legal ways to union bust and there are definitely illegal ways to union bust. Where on the spectrum do they sit right now? Like 1 to 10. 10 being most illegal, 1 being unethical but legal.
I mean, they kind of run the gamut. Amazon loves to innovate, so they're not gonna, so like some things are more of a 5, some things are maybe a 2, but some things are like a 9.5. I will be very interested to see what kind of legal challenges and legal decisions are brought after the election wraps up. I know the union is focused on just the election right now, but this will not be the last we're hearing about Amazon's anti-union practices. I can tell you that much.
What's the worst you've heard?
I mean, this mailbox is very blatant. Like that's something that is very intimidating. It's very blatant. They've been actively pushing people to use it. And there's still this question of what's going to happen to the ballots in the box. We don't know. Are they going to toss them? Are they going to play by the rules and use them? Has Amazon ever played by the rules? There's a lot of instances leading up to that, of anti-union activity, anti-union propaganda, but that's just so egregious. That's the one that I think people are paying attention to, because it's like, they're stealing the election, and then there's like physically trying to steal the election,
Yeah, I mean, it's a Republican tactic, frankly, where they've, same thing. All right, so after this vote happens, this is just one facility with Amazon. What does this mean? What could this signify? What kind of changes can come out of this if they win or lose, frankly?
I mean, this is going to be a watershed moment in American labor history, no matter what happens. And I'm hoping that they win, because that'll just be lighting the spark of things. That's the analogy I keep coming back to. All you need to start something big is to hit that spark, and the workers here are holding those matches. But we've already seen, I think it was Bloomberg that reported that RWSU, the union, has already heard from workers heard from 1,000 workers across the country asking, can we be next? How do we do this? How do we get in on this? So people are watching, right? And once the Amazon workers here win, they will be setting that precedent that, it can be done. Not only can it be done in the US, it can be done in this environment that's so, Republican, red state, right to work, like all of these barriers are here. But if they can just hurdle over them and they can pull it off here, what's to stop workers in any other Amazon facility doing the same thing? There's not only legal precedent, there will be kind of an inspirational precedent, we can do this. And, workers, Amazon is a global company. They have workers all across the world. We've already seen, I think that we've seen so many solidarity messages from workers across the country, but even there were Italian Amazon workers on strike yesterday or the day before about pandemic safety, and just kind of, being hey, we're watching. Polish Amazon workers are sending messages. It's hard to understate how big this is, especially because it's happening here in the South, which has been written off in so many ways and has been, the labor movement here has been kneecapped and ground down so much, but it's still here and it's doing really important work, and you cannot write that off. Where the South goes is, I think, where the movement should be going. And if they lose, that it'll be a heartbreaker, but they will still have gotten this far, and they will still have set this example, and people will see this and be like, okay, well, we got to do it then. We got to get to the finish line.
And they'll be aware of the tactics too, because they're throwing everything at them. And so the next place, my guess is, even though they love to innovate, they may not have innovated enough tactics at that point to, who knows? But it's simultaneously, this is happening while the PRO Act is being presented to the Senate. Where are we with the PRO Act, and why is the PRO Act so important? It keeps being labeled the most important piece of labor legislation, possibly in 100 years.
Well, because it is. We haven't had this opportunity to actually have a chance to get through this kind of big, fairly bold labor legislation in a long time, because the last president clearly wasn't going to do it. And even the ones before that wasn't a priority. We have an administration that at the very least are branding themselves as pro-union, pro-labor. And they've been publicly supporting this legislation. So I was like, okay, we actually have a shot here. And the PRO Act will actually rectify some of the issues that we have in existing labor law and make it easier to unionize, make it easier for workers to, collectively bargain. Like I would have to go through and pick out and choose all the, all the important things. I haven't been following as closely as some people because I've been down here, but it's really important. It's going to help so many people. I really hope that they force it through. Like, I don't know what kind of Senate sorcery is needed to make it happen, but I really hope they pull it off because it really will help workers in this country. And this is really something that we need because there are so many people who are left out and kind of cut off from our current labor laws, that because those labor laws are largely, they were passed in the 30s and the 40s when we didn't have politicians that even had to pretend to care about, like, how do we help migrant farm workers? How do we help Black workers? How do we help disabled workers? Like, there's so much more awareness of what the working class looks like now and what they need, that we really have an opportunity here to do some good. And I really hope they don't screw it up.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, in the case of the Bessemer election right now, part of the PRO Act shortens election times, make sure that they don't have these long, drawn out election processes, because what happens when these elections are really drawn out for over a month?
I mean, people lose interest. It gives the employer way more time to just keep hammering with anti-union propaganda. I heard from a worker the other day that actually quit because they're just so tired of dealing with it. They said it felt like a psyop, like they're just constantly bombarded with the propaganda, with the managers, just with the text messages. Their phones are blowing up all the time. If there was a 2-week election, I think it would look a lot different. Amazon has had such a long time to hammer home these messages, and people just get sick of it too. Like folks have things to do. They don't want to have to think about this all the time. They want to go to work, go home, live their lives, and they're just being hammered for, I think this has been 7 weeks. That was a really long time. And, I hope that it doesn't hurt the vote here, but it is, drawing things out never helps. Voluntary recognition is always ideal, but if you're gonna go for an election, keep it snappy,
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's also money to be made. There's a lot of incentives to drag it out as well. So, okay, so the PRO Act is there's an opportunity here to transform how this country deals with labor, to remove right to work states, the ability for a state to be right to work, which is exactly, what has happened in the South, which happened in the West. And it's in a lot of these states where you've seen the red state revolts, where, educators have organized in these red states and fought and won, or $15 minimum wage wins in Florida or whatever. You're seeing there's an appetite on the ground. This was before the pandemic. I kind of want to shift gears because I feel one aspect of the economy that is not connected to labor as much, even though it should be, and it's completely intersectional, is women have universally suffered the most during this pandemic and the economy, both things, whether it's managing your home or just taking on the burden of the economy that's in a spiral. Yet, and the workforce, by the way, overwhelmingly female, that is tied to labor, whether it's frontline workers being teachers, at-home care workers, healthcare workers, flight attendants. I mean, we could go through the list of all of these different unionized workforces that have been on the front lines that are majority women made up and women led. Yet somehow this doesn't connect. I don't understand why, Biden is not saying we support our frontline workers, which means we support unions. Oh, by the way, and this is a feminist issue.
It's a Women's History Month right now, right? So we might get a couple mentions, might get a couple cursory mentions, but I mean, the disconnect is so ingrained. Yesterday was one of the equal pay days, right? And there's all this celebration around it, but even that equal pay day, that's only for some women. That leaves behind Black workers, brown workers, Indigenous women, Asian women. There's just a lack of intersectional focus in general. And I mean, even what you're talking about, the pandemic, there has been a lot of reporting about, this is hurting women, this is hurting women. It's specifically hurting Black and brown women. These are the details that are being left out because people, maybe they're not paying enough attention, or they don't care enough, or, I can't ascribe motives to anybody else, right? But it's disappointing because, like you said, the working class is majority women. It's women of color specifically who are leading these charges. And I think that the movement needs to be making a greater effort to, spotlight that and show that that's actually happening and give actual resources and actual support to efforts like this. I mean, the effort here in Bessemer is being led by Black women. Like one of the most vocal public faces of the campaign, Jennifer Bates, she just turned 49. She's a middle-aged Black woman who comes from a labor background. She's been a union worker before, and now she's trying to lift up the rest of her coworkers. This is the kind of story that we see, and there just isn't as much acknowledgement of it. And you're right, it's a problem. They should probably.
I mean, look at the $15 minimum wage, for instance. For the last 10 years, it was led by women of color who, I'll never forget the marches across New York City, shutting down New York City, downtown, just seeing these fast food workers in particular, moms, right? They were trying to change the narrative that, no, it's not all teenagers. That was 10 years ago. But that was a women-led movement. And it boggles my mind how, like, somehow I wish more unions would lean on the fact that it is a feminist issue. So when they are pressuring the Biden administration to support the $15 minimum wage, or pressuring Kyrsten Sinema or Joe Manchin to support the $15 minimum wage, it's not just coming from a place of working people need a living wage. It's union members are the advocates for this. The unions that support you, Joe Manchin, still, is mind-boggling to me. But also women, like, it is sexist for you not to support the $15 minimum wage. Can we just say that? It is sexist for you to not support the PRO Act. If you're for frontline workers, show it.
There's so much rhetoric around, the family, hardworking, hardworking this, hardworking that. Like, that leaves out single mothers, that leaves out women in general who are having to deal with these extra care, like child care or elder care, like just the mountains of invisible labor that most women have to put up with. And it is a feminist issue. And I think there's just such this reticence in, I guess, mainstream politics to touch anything that's like too, that's the feminists are into that. We can't get too into that. But it just comes down to the way that politicians flatten identities into even talking about the Republicans, talking about, the hardworking Americans, the blue collar working class. Who do you think is in the working class? Who do you think is wearing these blue collars? Like, it's not just and all these white collar bosses trying to cosplay that they're from the working class because they saw a hammer once. Like, it just shows like this fundamental disconnect between, what these people that have these platforms have this power and the people who, are just being used as tools and used as props. Like seeing Kyrsten Sinema talking about, how women need to, have a higher wage and women this, women that. Like, okay, well, we just saw what you did, girl. Like, you clearly don't care enough. Yeah, Rainbow Braid over here. Like, like, it's just, there's such a resistance to take even the most basic intersectional analysis to anything, and to admit that the workers, the working class, like this block that you've imagined in your head is not just like the guys like my dad who are like white guys in a hard hat who like could go Trump or Bernie depending on how they feel. Like, that's not what the working class looks like anymore. That's not who you need to be paying attention to or taking care of or trying to support. Like,
but that was who they were trying to woo post 2016. The narrative out of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin was that sliver of white working class men were sexist, right? That was their whole thing, that they were sexist, and that's why they went to Trump. But turns out, the margins were actually a lot smaller this time, granted more voters in those swing states that we mentioned. And it may not have been about sexism. It may have just been about you're focusing on a group of working class people that we shouldn't be focusing on. Maybe work on expanding the electorate, which is arguably what Biden did do to win. He got more votes, but the margins were smaller in these states, and he still lost to those voters, the white working class men.
And if you're going to talk about union members in this country, what a union member looks like, it is a far more typical example of a union worker to talk about a Black woman who works as a home health care aide or a hotel cleaner who is a member of, SIU or Unite Here, who just got laid off and lost her income in the pandemic. Like, it's so frustrating. I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm going to be writing about in the book that I still need to start writing. But it's just this lack of understanding and lack of care when it comes to actually understanding who you're talking about, who you're trying allegedly to fight for. It all comes down to like, what is the most convenient politically instead of what's actually happening. And that's how we keep getting into all these messes. And that's why, one of the reasons why it's so important to pass this PRO Act, because, legislation that getting it on the books, even if it's flawed, even if it's not perfect, that is a start. And I mean, at this point, we're down so bad, like we need a start.
Right. I mean, if the centrists can use identity against working people, then working people should use identity against their narrative, because you can't sit there and say hashtag support our frontline workers, and then as the economy is collapsing, the most basic necessities. Yeah,
the hashtags don't really put food on the table or pay your rent. Like like performative tweets from senators don't actually do anything but distract the people who have time to sit and look at Twitter. Mm-hmm. Like, the Amazon workers at the facility here are not seeing these pathetic attempts to dunk by like Dave Clark or whoever's running the Amazon propaganda networks. Like, they don't see that, but we do. Like, so we'll dunk on you while they're doing the real work.
Exactly. Well, Kim Kelly, love having you on. Love talking labor with you anytime. We're a labor friendly show, as you know. So keep up the amazing work. Stay safe. Hope you steer clear of any tornadoes. It's my greatest fear. I have a reoccurring nightmare. I've had it since I was a kid. It's like I know in a different life I probably died of a tornado. I twice a year at least, I have horrifying tornado dreams. So when I hear things like this, I start to like develop the sweat. So stay safe.
Oh my gosh, it seems to be a little calmer now. We'll see. I mean, cross fingers. There's a basement.
I was gonna say, it better be a basement. What's the evacuation strategy? Do we need to walk you through this?
I just want to know when Jeff Bezos bought his weather machine. That's my biggest question.
First, you had to damage the environment, the ecosystem, and that's the joke about Amazon. He literally wiped it out. No.
I just have questions, but
Kim, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'll see you soon.
See you soon. Stay safe. Be right back. Oh my God, I'm so happy to see you in your little studio. I have my little studio, you have your... If people could like expand outward and see our studios, they'd be amazed. But your sound's off. While you're doing that, I'll do the intro. Helen Hong is the host of Jobsolete podcast and the Go Fact Yourself podcast. She is an actor, comedian, TV host, and news commentator. She's a frequent guest on NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I love Wait. I grew up with it, so it's so wonderful hearing you on when you go on. So,
hi, can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
I can show you exactly what's going on in my Zoom room. It's literally my closet. See?
Oh my God, it's
see the hanging part. It's literally my bedroom closet. So
you've got all the foam. So I just added some stuff in my it's not really a garage. It's like a sunroom or something. It's like very old. And I added all of my paintings I haven't hung on the wall that are huge that got water damaged, but they're helping with the sound because no amount of foam, I'm like covered in foam. No amount of foam helps. Like just saw yours.
I bought all of this foam off of some random dude on Craigslist, and I need more. I need to hit up the Craigslist guy again. Yeah, I got it for cheap. I mean, it was real sketchy. It was like out of his garage. I was like, maybe I shouldn't be here because I might get murdered. But yeah, the foam helps. But yeah, you need a lot of it.
A lot of it. People don't understand. Those Patreon subscribers, those patrons, it's going to foam. And then the other stuff like staff. All right, so let's shift gears for a second, because last week there were these horrific the hate crime. That's my definition. I don't know when the rest of the country is going to catch up. The hate crimes that took place in Atlanta against the Asian community, against women, horrified the country, has opened up a well-needed and overdue conversation about what defines a hate crime, what rhetoric from the former president, Trump, leads to regarding the China virus, and the rise of hate crimes against the Asian community. Yeah. But a few days before, Dorsey, I think we have this clip of from Now This, you talked about a personal experience in which someone you love and care for was a victim of a hate crime. Can we play that clip?
I told you to be careful because lately there's a lot of random attacks on old Asian people.
A couple of days ago, I went to Stop and Shop grocery supermarket. Somebody left the cart in the parking lot. So I brought it to the collector area and just to turn around, this attendant, he pushed one cart about 7 or 8 feet. He threw it to me so fast. When I turn around, I have no chance to avoid it. This cart just crossed over my left toe. And then I came home, I opened the socks. The area is dark. The blood is dead. It hit me so hard.
So this features your story of your father.
Yeah.
Can you give a little bit of background on what happened?
Yeah, it was so crazy. You know, he didn't even tell me that this had happened. I started a YouTube channel with my dad called Old Korean Dad Stories and sometimes Mom. And mostly we talk about like stories from the Korean War and his past. Like he has all these incredible stories. And so I was doing a video with him about the general attacks. I said, I told you to be careful. There's all these attacks happening. And he's like, then he springs this on me, that this had happened to him. And I was like, wait, you didn't tell me that before. And also, like, did you report it? And he's like, no, I was only mildly injured. And I'm like, what? Like the fact that this guy, he was an employee of that supermarket. He was the guy that collects the carts in the parking lot, was screaming racist obscenities at my father and shoved a cart. Obviously, he was younger than my father. And that's the thing that really gets me. It's that these cowards, they're always younger, they're mostly men. And, often they come up behind the victim. The victim doesn't even know what's happening. They push them, they attack them from behind. It's just so cowardly. And, my dad's approach to it, I think, is the same approach that a lot of elderly first generation immigrants are taking, which is why a lot of these incidents are going severely underreported. They're like,
they're stoic.
They're like, we don't speak English that well. Like, who are we going to tell? Like, I don't even have the language capacity to describe the incident properly. I don't have the language to like fight back against these people. So I'm just going to suck it up. Mm-hmm. And for us, the younger generation and the generation that was born and raised here, we're like, no. We have to make noise about this. We have to complain about this. We have to speak out against this because this is wrong. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. That's why like my dad never reported it. He didn't even report it to the supermarket management. Like all of these incidents are going severely underreported. So right now, I think the official numbers are there have been 4,000 attacks. There's way more. I mean, that's not even scratching the surface. And it is because of this past year of Kung flu and the China virus, like our politicians and officials making these, these like jokey, like, yeah, it's the Kung flu, it's the China. It's so irresponsible because these have real world consequences on people like my dad. My dad was the victim of an attack. He even says like, if I had been 3 inches to the left, I might have broken a hip. I mean, that's how hard this guy shoved this cart at me. I could have broken a kneecap. I could have broken a hip, like something way worse could have happened. And it was just dumb luck that only my toe was injured.
And this is in Los Angeles too. I mean,
this is in Boston.
Well, okay. Fair enough. I mean, this is in a major city where there's diversity. I mean, I remember a few years ago, this is before we saw in New York a rise of hate crimes against the Jewish community. People literally couldn't understand how they literally thought, okay, well, we're in a city, we're not going to have those attacks because there's diversity everywhere. But it's just wrong. There's a rise in hate crimes all across this country. Everywhere. And the government isn't documenting them because, number one, hate crimes are state by state, how you decide what a hate crime is, and it takes forever. And a lot of these states decided what a hate crime was 20, 35 years ago. In Atlanta in particular, they actually do designate violence against women as a hate crime, but that's not even in the conversation right now. So even though that's the law, it's not even being presented that way, which is mind-blowing to me.
And I'm so glad that you are calling that Atlanta attack a hate crime, because that's exactly what it was. And it's funny that you said, the rest of the country will catch up. I feel like the rest of the country realizes that. The only people that are not on board are the officials in Georgia, apparently, are the only people that are like, well, and the thing that infuriated me is how much empathy seems to be given to the assailant, the perpetrator, the criminal who has openly admitted, the murderer who admitted, yeah, I murdered,
He had a bad day though, Helen.
He had a
bad day. He woke up on the wrong side of bed.
I go eat a freaking tub of Ben and Jerry's like the rest of us do when we have a bad. Go get some potato chips and snuggle up with Dirty Dancing or whatever movie you need to watch when you're having a bad day. Don't go out and shoot up 3 Asian massage parlors. You're insane. And the thing that I wrote on Twitter, trying to make light of it is the officials apparently are accepting his response, which is I'm not racist. I mean, my penis might be racist, but I'm not. I'm not. I mean, my junk might be racist, but this was not. Give me a break. GTF out of here. It's so insane. It obviously was a hate crime. Yeah. He obviously targeted these businesses because they were Asian women. So don't try to finagle his way out of this. This is so obvious to the rest of the world that this was a hate crime. So let's call it what it was.
And the premise of this argument came from that sheriff who has rightfully been removed. I don't know what's suspended, removed, fire the mother effer, who had presented online shirts and swag, quoting
racist paraphernalia.
Yes,
so calling it the Corona imported from China, and he got and he even wrote China just like the way that the former president says that word, and so the rhetoric has real world consequences. And we're obviously seeing that. And I did a piece on Now This warning about this a year ago. Yep. 1 full year ago, I did a piece on Now This where I said, you can't call this the China virus. You can't call a virus does not have a nationality. Viruses do not have ethnicity. They're coming for you, whether you want them or not, regardless of race. So, the whole thing is just so irresponsible. And now, I just want to make an appeal to good-hearted people, the people who watch your show, fans of yours are decent people, I hope, mostly decent people. And, I'm really calling out to a call of action of don't sit by. We have to stand up for our brothers and sisters here because, just like the Black Lives Matter took off when everybody became activated and everybody became enraged. This has been happening to Black people for hundreds of years in this country, and they're 20% of the population. Meanwhile, we Asians, we've only been here for about 50 years, and we're only 6% of the population. So we can't do it on our own. I can't. My parents live on the other side of the country. My parents weigh a combined weight of 240 pounds, and I'm not kidding. Dripping wet. My parents are tiny, tiny people. My mom literally wears a 00. You know what that is, Nomiki?
I've seen it.
It's when 0 is too big for your ass. That's when you go to a size 00. My mom is a 00. This woman is a willy wisp of a woman. So I can't do that. I'm across the country. I cannot be watching my parents. I cannot be policing our old people. We're just not, there's not enough of us. So my call to action is if you see something, say something for real. For real. This is when you have to activate and please appeal to the best part of your nature and, offer protection, keep your eyes peeled. If you see elderly Asian people, if you see Asian women, if you see any Asian person that's by themselves, like keep an eye on them, because
film the stuff too. Defend them, film it, call people out. We know that police don't always understand. We've heard many in the last several weeks. We've heard many call-ins where people said, I experienced a hate crime or experienced this, a violent attack. There was a woman on NPR a couple of days ago who talked about being attacked at a restaurant, and she called the police and they said, well, what are we supposed to do? She goes, does this happen often? He says, yeah. So before we wrap, I want to play this clip of Meghan McCain, because if you see something, say something. And this woman has one of the largest audiences in the country. The View is an extremely popular show on a major network, ABC. Let's roll this clip.
And so we're going to a place where even if people need money, even if people are qualified to get into Ivy Leagues, race and gender is more important than your skill qualifications, the content of your character. It is not what Martin Luther King Jr. preached. I think this is a very, very slippery slope. I was very surprised to hear someone like Tammy Duckworth say something like this. She got a lot of blowback from a lot of people, not just on the right. And I think this is actually just the natural progression of identity politics. And I will say, just to put a cap on this, The View is 25 years old next year. We've only had one Asian American co-host this show. So does that mean that one of us should be leaving at some point because there's not enough representation? We're talking about, is identity politics more important than qualifications of a job? And I think that's a question going forward that the progressive left is going to have to reconcile.
Okay, and before we go, because we're going to go and take a break, eventually we're going to come back and talk about the black farmer
excluded.
Oh my God. Okay.
Whoopi Goldberg is all of us. She is literally all of us. Meghan McCain is trash. And I can't believe she's coming out so hard right on the heels, literally a day after she had to apologize publicly for getting called out for calling the coronavirus the China virus and being like, I don't have a problem with it being called the China virus. What's the big deal with the calling us the China virus? Well, bitch, now you see the big deal. People are getting hurt. People are getting murdered because of your freaking big mouth flapping off irresponsibly, being like, I don't know why it's a big deal. We call it the China virus. Like, give me a break.
What kills me though is like there's an aggrievement, right? They're more upset with identity. God forbid minorities or people of color step up and say, we deserve to live. And they're like, well, that's identity politics, or we deserve representation in government so that we have representatives who remind folks that we deserve to live. And she's like aggrieved as a child of a billionaire and a former senator.
Yeah.
Like, God forbid you police my words from a...
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
And the thing that she was saying, which is the argument against affirmative action and the argument against diversity hiring and the argument against so many things, is such a perfect example. Like, if you talk to anybody in any industry, the number one thing that they tell you is it's all about who you know. Mm-hmm. That's how you get that job. It's all about who you know.
Personal experience.
It's got to be about who you know. So, like, if you only know blonde people, only blonde people are getting hired. If you only know white folks, only white folks are getting hired. I mean, people of color have known this for decades. And she's talking about like only the qualified people, like, we need to reach out to the most qualified candidate. It's like, well, how do you get qualification? You get qualification through experience. How do you get experience? You get experience by getting the job. How do you get the job? By knowing someone who looks like you.
Not to mention economic disadvantages. There's we could go through the list of inequities in this country. I mean, the irony of this whole thing, just a side note, she's talking about, we had one Asian person, it was Lisa Ling, who has been very vocal about these attacks, and her husband, Paul Song, who is a Bernie Sanders supporter, as you were too, who've been incredibly vocal about these attacks that have been happening against the Asian community. Like, how dare you speak on behalf of how dare you? I mean, I've known her for a long time. Okay. We both started in the media together. Look at our trajectories. I'm not a McCain. I am not a person of color, but I'm just trying to say, like, this is not, there are institutional issues. And then layered on top of the institutional issues, there are who you know. I had a conversation recently with somebody, and I'm sure you could refer to this, a white man who was very upset about identity politics and cancel culture. And he said, you know, he explained how he was passed up on a project for a black man got it instead. And I said, oh, okay. So did you ever think that table had 10 people and you were the worst of the 10
worst
guys?
of the whites. You were the worst of the whites. So you know what, buddy? Hit the road. Worst of the whites. Like my mediocrity was not. That's offensive to me. That my mediocre ass did not make the cut. And it's so enraging, and it is something that is very, very, very familiar to people of color. I mean, we talk about this, I'm an actor, and we talk about this in the entertainment industry all the time. It's like, people complain, like, people will be like, well, the Asian actors just aren't up to par.
Oh my God.
Well, how do you get up to par? You get smaller roles, which lead to bigger roles, which lead to starring roles, and that gets you up to par, right? Well, if the beginning roles are only like 2 lines as an Asian massage parlor worker, or 2 lines as a nail salon, because there's, nail salon worker, or 2 lines as the Chinese restaurant waitress. How many roles are there? Right. That's 5 roles in a year. Like, how do you get up to par? The stepping stones for us are not there. You need to actively create the stepping stones for us to get up to par, quote unquote. If an Asian actress has only ever been able to audition to play a Chinese food waitress, right, that, whereas a white actress can play anything. A secretary, a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, a construction worker. Like, you think there's ever been an Asian construction worker hired in the history of Hollywood? You think there's an Asian dog walker that's ever been hired in the history of Hollywood? An Asian business exec, like a business executive, unless it's a Japanese company. Like, give me a break. Like, the stepping stones are not there for us. So don't even tell me about us not being up to par. There's a systematic, the system is rigged against us.
Yes.
Black people are so familiar with this. Brown people are so familiar with this. Asian people are so familiar with this.
Absolutely. Helen Hogg, you are up to par for our show. If we had a little ecosystem, I would be chatting with you all day long. Love you, support you. I hope your parents are doing well.
Thank you.
Folks, call to action. Watch out.
Action.
Get your cameras up.
Yeah.
Defend. Be an ally.
Be an ally. And a lot of the things that you can do to help are similar to if you help sexual harassment victims. Like, go stand next to them, be like, hey, come over here, stand next to me, Mary, Sue, whatever. Like, pretend like you're their friend. Just be an ally. Don't just stand by.
Love you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, we will be right back with Jordan Zachary. We're going to talk about Cuomo, the best topic ever, the topic that never ends, Andrew Cuomo. Be right back. Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Jordan Zachary. He runs the Progressives Everywhere newsletter. Go check it out. It's incredible. It's one of these amazing. No, I'm not like.
I'm gonna keep going. It's fine.
He's incredible. It's incredible. And he's a regular on our show. I've been waiting to do this conversation with you because we're both New Yorkers, and there's a certain type of New Yorker that's been aware of Andrew Cuomo prior to COVID, and there's a certain type of New Yorker who's just learning about Andrew Cuomo prior to COVID. All right, latest, where we are right now is we have the Assembly, the New York State Assembly, which is in the process of undergoing impeachment proceedings. Could take a very long time, could take many, many, many months. The Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie, just tested positive for COVID. So has Ron Kim, by the way, who broke open the New York nursing home scandal. And we wish the best to both of them. I know that Carl Hastie just received his vaccine, too. So be on the lookout, guys. If you get your vaccine, doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be safe just yet. So I want to start with this Biden clip. because, this was from over a week ago at this point, but it's important because it so much of this is 3-dimensional, 10-dimensional chess. It's not just about if Andrew Cuomo was to resign or be impeached or all the investigations. It's about where the power lies that's going to hold him accountable. Can we play that clip?
President Biden giving his most extensive comments yet about Andrew Cuomo. The New York governor is currently under investigation by the state's attorney general for multiple credible claims of sexual harassment and misconduct.
If the investigation confirms the claims of the women, should he resign?
Yes, I think he probably end up being prosecuted too.
Meanwhile, new reporting in the New York Times details the lengths the governor and his allies went to discredit Lindsey Boylan, the first accuser to go public. According to the Times, Cuomo's team started circulating an open letter attacking Boylan that they hoped former staff members, specifically women, would sign. No one would.
So this is a big deal. Full disclosure, Lindsey Boylan is a friend of mine, and I support her. And I, of course I believe her, and I believe all of the women who've stepped up with full documentation, by the way. This is very classic Cuomo. I think many people have received the pressure from his staff members or others in the past. And so that might have worked when he was fighting the IDC, when he was complaining to editors about coverage of the IDC and his connection to it, or many other things. This is how it's, but in this case, you see staffers since Lindsey Boylan has stepped up, previous staffers and current staffers, women, say that they too have experienced this. Jordan, this is really important. This is what is catching fire. Simultaneously, there's other investigations going on that are probably more prosecutorial, at least at this point. How are these dynamics? Like, what do you think is like, where the power, how's the power going to flow for this to hold him accountable? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. So like you said, the Assembly's doing an investigation, which could, like you said, could take months. They're contracting out the investigation to a law firm that has plenty of New York State political connections. So plenty of conflict of interest already right there. But, Letitia James, the Attorney General, who has, obviously she owes her position to Cuomo, but is certainly...
Explain that.
Well, so Andrew Cuomo, you mentioned the IDC.
Obvious to most people.
Yeah. So Andrew Cuomo, as you mentioned, the IDC, that was a group of breakaway Democrats who were kind of Democrats because you have to be in New York. They decided that they would team up with Republicans to give them the control of the state Senate. That was through most of 2013 to 2018, and just stopped so much progress and allowed Cuomo to just be, whatever he wanted to happen would happen. Whatever he didn't want, he could squash without, seeming like a bad governor. You say, well, we can't pass it in the state Senate. And basically in 2018, a lot of real Democrats, progressives, ran with the help of the Working Families Party to beat those members of the IDC. And Letitia James, who is like a, real long time Working Family Member Party and endorsee, she wanted to run for Attorney General. And Cuomo said, I will support you, which is, kind of like a, kingmaker type deal, if you reject the endorsement of the Working Families Party. Because Cuomo really hated the Working Families Party because they were supporting Cynthia Nixon, who was primarying him. She said, all right, she made that deal with the literal devil. And she accepted his endorsement, said no to the Working Families Party, and won. Now she's in the position where she has to investigate Cuomo. And, to be fair to her, she took the deal. Don't love that, but to be fair to her, she was the person who broke open the nursing home scandal. Once, her office investigated that after Ron Kim, who you mentioned before, hopefully he's okay, he says COVID, for months and months and months, nearly a year, was talking about how it was clear that Cuomo administration was just covering up, 10,000 deaths from nursing homes, blaming it, saying it doesn't do with COVID. So Letitia James is one of two people now one of two groups doing investigations into Cuomo. The wide-ranging one for the Assembly, they have they can investigate a whole lot. They've been allowed to the nursing home scandal, the covering up problems with the bridge that bears his father's name, the Mario Cuomo Bridge.
Yeah. This has been going on for a while.
Yeah,
just
sexual
crazy.
harassment.
It's not safe.
Yeah.
It's like, don't take the Mario Cuomo Bridge, guys. Just don't do it.
You think that the one named after his dad, he'd probably want to make sure it's safe and not seem
details, buddy. Details.
Right. And so they're investigating that, and that can take months. And people see that as buying time for Cuomo to, I guess, wait out the outrage. Letitia James is investigating just the sexual harassment claims. Although I imagine she gets busier and busier every day because more and more people seem to be coming out saying, yeah, Governor Cuomo groped me, said weird stuff to me, unhooked my bra, just all these terrible accusations that obviously people in his office investigate are saying that it happened. People who are working for him. I don't know what more proof you need. You don't say about your current boss, who is the governor of New York, that he sexually harassed me. There's very little upside to doing that if it is not true, and even if it is true, it's puts you out on a limb forever. And so, it's one of those things where it's going to take. I can't imagine that if Cuomo is going to be forced to resign or to be impeached, this assembly investigation, I can't imagine is going to be the thing that makes it happen, because that's going to take so long. And so I would imagine it's going to be Letitia James and her investigation, or just more and more people coming out and saying these things about Cuomo to, force the hand of the state assembly, which is still, controlled by Democrats who are, I guess they owe something to Cuomo, or they, So,
well, not to mention there's the right wing, which has pushed for investigations. You have the Albany police saying that something criminal may have happened. They're going to investigate. And I think this is why Biden, I believe in my heart that Biden may have had a Biden gaffe in this interview, where he said he'll probably be prosecuted because the feds are involved as well, the Department of Justice. He is being investigated from every single level. But to be fair, Andrew Cuomo is the king of investigations. He has survived. His staff hasn't.
He buried them. He keeps burying them.
I mean, his best friend, his second brother, Joe Percoco, that's what he called him, is in jail right now because of a Moreland Commission play scandal that existed, with the Buffalo $1 billion sent to Buffalo, where I grew up, and basically went into the pockets of different folks. And there's a few people in jail now. So, I mean, this is a very classic Cuomo. It's not that complicated. It's just not sexy. And I think this is the thing, the nursing home scandal, where it definitely hit a nerve with so many people. It really went over, simultaneously with the sexual harassment and assault scandal, and Tish James, his own party member and loyal person, that kind of cracked it open. So he's being attacked from both sides. He's done deals with Republicans, but now the Republicans are going after him. He's done deals with the left, but they always go after him. So he's getting isolated. He's being attacked from all different fronts, which I think is different, than the Moreland Commission, where nobody understood it. It was corruption. Corruption's not sexy. And his approval ratings would go down. And that's ultimately, I've talked to a lot of different politicians, current governors, former governors. What is it that really will make or break? And they always say, if his approval rating dips below 30%. I don't know why 30%.
Why? God,
I don't know why.
Absolutely hated. He's got to be reviled by 75% of the country.
I mean, maybe there's some factor, sure. Whatever. This is beyond me, right? But this is what 35% is what everybody keeps saying. His approval ratings dropped astronomically within 4 or 5 days. He went from, I'm going to be off a little bit, 43% saying he should stay in office to 33% he should stay in office. Those aren't approval ratings, but they're similar. Right. So if you're Andrew Cuomo, who's a master chess player, right? Really, he is, I'll give credit where credit's due, the best in the business. Seriously. Mm-hmm. He has an Achilles heel. It's fear, instilling fear in others and anger and, all the things that he does. But if you're Andrew Cuomo, you want this process to delay through the assembly, who's currently going through impeachment proceedings and investigations. You want the budget to go through, which we're now in the midst of. He's presenting his budget and it's a tense time in Albany. And you want to use that to barter your security, at least to finish out a term. No?
Yeah, think about how much money, the American Rescue Plan, the stimulus is going to provide New York State, right? All these legislators have these projects and that they desperately need to get done. I think what I just saw was that they came to some agreement on marijuana legalization after Cuomo kind of dragged his heels on that for years. Maybe that's part of it. He's kind of, like you said, using as bartering points, because there's so much to get done, whether it's opening schools, whether it is, distributing so much money that's going to come through the American Rescue Plan. All these legislators wanted to go to their home district and say, look what I got, look at these projects, money for funding for this thing, all these benefits that we got, we can now make testing and we can get vaccines out faster. So I think that, he is trying to use that, like you said, as sort of the way to get people maybe not on the side, but to back off a little bit. But budget has to be in apparently by April 1st. That never really happens. I don't due dates don't really matter, I don't think.
Although he's a big fan of saying, I get it on time.
Albany, but right, yeah. I think he's going to have a little bit harder
cares.
time getting people to, no, absolutely, nobody cares. He's going to have a little harder time, I think, getting people to agree to those things. Alessandro Biaggi is already sending emails and ringing the bell and making, big demands, which obviously she should. She took down one of his big allies in the IDC.
And she's
so,
also
that,
former staffer. She was not staffer. She was an
Yes.
appointed person in his administration, Alessandra Biaggi, who's a senator.
Yeah, she's part of the women's working group, right? The sexual harassment working group in Albany who, this is a big problem too. This is not just Cuomo being a creep.
Oh,
this
no.
is a huge problem throughout all of, there's Shelley Silver, the former, assembly leader. He, a speaker of the assembly, he had a bunch of a lawyer who was a huge creep that ended up being, sexually assaulting people. There's Alessandra Biaggi, who was part of the sexual harassment working group. There's so many people in Albany, or women who have worked in Albany, who have said, this is a real problem and this is a real cesspool. And Cuomo was the king of the cesspool, and
There was that line, what happens past Bear Mountain stays past Bear Mountain. Bear Mountain is like the marker of like, you're getting closer to Albany, things stay in. And, it is, listen, I don't know enough about it. Andrew Cuomo, yes, he's the king of the cesspool now. He wasn't 10 years ago. 10 years ago, this was the norm. I mean, I guess the ground has shifted so much because of, start with Alan Hevesy, who went to jail. There's the former controller of the state. You had Shelley Silver, who's in office for 20, or I don't know, much longer than that, but he was the Speaker of the Assembly for 20 something years. You had the leader of the Senate, who Dean Scalos, who also went to jail, all in the same time period. Malcolm Smith went to jail. Many state senators, many assembly members. There was such a shift, a drastic and quick shift with people who've been in power for decades. And it happened because of sex scandals, because of bribery, because of pay-to-play scandals, because of kickbacks, because of so many different issues. And so the foundation has shifted so much in Albany. And Andrew Cuomo has been able to survive that because it kind of came out after that, those crises, at least as governor. But simultaneously, you have progressives like Jabari Brisport and Julia Salazar and, Jessica Ramos. I mean, all of these people who've come in post IDC have really shifted the conversation. So the power dynamics are shifting. I mean, it's good, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was used to be the three men in the room, smoke-filled rooms, right, in Albany. It used to be whatever they decide gets, we'll get introduced, then we'll pass, and it'll be the budget, and that'll be that. And now, all of a sudden, power is more diffuse because why are these people, there's so many lawmakers who don't owe their careers to these, men smoking cigars in rooms in Albany. And so that's such a big deal because they're not just going to be loyal foot soldiers. They are going to vote their conscience and go, for their own communities. And so I think that we look back at beating the IDC in 2018, that was to try and get some legislation passed, right? For so many things that needed to happen. But the fact that I think it changed the entire paradigm of what's happening in Albany. I just wish that Jumaane Williams had beaten Kathy Hochul, the lieutenant governor. I think he lost by 3 points in 2018. I'm much more excited. I want Cuomo to be gone. Be much more excited for him to leave if Jumaane Williams was taking over. As
we can differ on that. He's my former opponent.
Well, what I'm saying is that Kathy Hochul is more
Kathy Hochul.
Yeah.
Yes, but Kathy Hochul, I'm. They're both of them are imperfect.
Yeah. Oh no, I mean.
Oh, we're cutting out.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is that there's a bit of. Oh, I'm losing you.
Yeah, you're
in the sense that I want new blood in Albany. Oh, sorry. Am I good?
Yes, but we need new blood that also respects women, also respects the budget prices, doesn't take real estate money. You got to be a real progressive, not somebody.
I will defer to you on that. And so I will say that I want here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Assuming Cuomo's gone, he's not going to run for election. Let's assume that. Who is your ideal candidate to run?
Well, first off, Kathy Hochul will be, if he has to step down, Kathy Hochul inherits the seat. And yes, she was brought in by Andrew Cuomo from Buffalo. I was actually raised in her district, so very familiar with the dynamics there. I think we need somebody who's bold and has a real vision and has real experience and is not tethered to the real estate industry, is not tethered to, and I mean, truly tethered. I mean, the thing is that there's a real track record here. There's money you can follow. There are people who say, I don't take it now, and they still do. Perfect. Somebody who is willing to shake things up and reform the systems and understands like what democracy, like shifting the democracy of the state, because fundamentally the Democratic Party is an institution in New York that is basically just, it's Cuomo's institution. There is no Democratic Party in New York, but there are other parties in New York that are pushing the levers. We have to reform those parties too, so that they're more democratic. And so, if we really want to change the way this ecosystem works, we actually have to change the power that backs them and make sure that they're actually progressive, that they're not supporting candidates to take real estate money, that they're not supporting candidates who sided with the police back rooms, who haven't rezoned their neighborhoods, and not just progressives in name only. I mean, you can show up to a protest and take photos when everybody's shown up, but are you still taking the money from the people you're protesting?
Right.
That's what I want to see. I love Cynthia Nixon. I assume she's not running again, but it would be wonderful to see somebody who's, I'm not opposed to Tish James. I think she's doing an extraordinary job as Attorney General. Surprisingly so. I did not back her. I backed Zephyr Teachout, but I will give her credit. She took on the NRA, and my God, that is the most powerful move anybody has taken against the NRA ever. So I don't know. Who do you think?
It's tough for me to say. I don't think I know. Obviously, I don't know people there as much as you. But I think what I would love to see is, like you said, someone who. I mean, you mentioned parties that even the smaller parties need to be reformed. I remember the Working Families Party. Who I support. They also backed Joe Crowley over AOC. There's all these vested interests that have to be severed, right? And so. Just I defer to you and who would be the right candidate.
Don't defer to me. Everybody's got a right to their opinion. Yeah.
I think for me, it's just, who is, I just want to see someone who hasn't maybe been around forever, who hasn't lived in that, I don't want to use the word swamp because it's a Trumpian word, but who hasn't, made all those deals already. And so I think that for me, you need, I guess, in Albany to be able to navigate Albany, experience and understanding of how the system works, but someone who hasn't been there so long that they, already are part of the institution there. So,
or who've defied them too.
New face. Cynthia Nixon sure didn't have. Yeah.
Cynthia Nixon, if folks don't think their whole thing on her was she was an experience, she crushed him in the debate. I was there in person, and it was one of the most powerful experiences seeing somebody who they kept saying is not smart enough, is not this, she's an actress, blah, blah, very sexist, condescending stuff. Sure. And meanwhile, she crushed him in the debate. She really crushed him in the debate. So I think it's a great conversation. We have a lot of time from now until then. Maybe some other folks will come up and stand out and defy, even if they came from the institutions, right? To be able to defy them. That's power. What Ron Kim did actually, because he hasn't always been fully progressive, but he's really transformed his position in power. And I give him a lot of credit. It takes a lot to say, no, thank you.
And he's been doing that, even when Cuomo was at his most powerful last year. It wasn't like he started doing this, when Tish James investigation came out. Right. And Ron Kim was doing it last February. He has been relentless in this. And so I think something like that, I really like Alessandra Biaggi. I think, she's powerful. She's effective. She's, she's my age, but she's incredible leader, I wouldn't be governor, but it's incredible to see, I think, and she, like you said, was working in Cuomo's Albany. So she has every motivation to avenge that in a way. So someone like her, Ron Kim, I think there's a lot of great
Jessica Ramos.
Yeah. Jessica Ramos is really great as well.
Union, really important. Yeah, absolutely. Especially if Andrew Yang's our mayor.
Yeah, that is
another conversation next time. Jordan Zegrin, thank you for this has been a whole show of just let's get it out. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for the Cuomo conversation. Always a blast.
I'm always happy to dump on him.
All right, we'll see you next week, Jordan.
All righty, sounds good.
Let's give you guys some shout outs. We have did you not, have you guys liked and subscribed already? If you haven't, this is the time to do it. Go like, go subscribe. Seriously, like this is the moment. We're post-Trump era. Media is kind of like, you know, reestablishing itself. So we need that foundation. It's really important. We're an independent show, as you guys know. We don't take like, we're not part of the corporate infrastructure. So it's important that these likes and subscribes and shares are really important. So, all right, Difficult Truth thank you so much, is giving out a tier 1 community sub gift. Oh, he gave one out yesterday. Thank you, A Difficult Truth. That's so sweet. Schultzy 100 says, hello, Nomiki Show. Persuading Biden to do stuff now is going to be way harder than I imagined. His brain, sometimes he sounds like Ben Carson. I'm beyond concerned. I don't think it's more about the Biden administration. Let's just say that. He has to take pressure. He's the president of the United States. So, and so does Chuck Schumer, by the way. Professor Harvey K, thank you so much for mixing it up in the live chats. We see you. We hear you. I chatted during the Puerto Rico segment. I sent something over to you. Hope you get a chance to go back and watch the opening because we gave you a shout out. JKR Dozer, thanks for the love. And Kowalski from Nebraska says, get some foam, coffee, CBD, or whatever you need. I'm over my coffee today, but that'll pay for tomorrow's coffee. Thank you. Big thank you to Mitty Ducks and Mario for working those algorithms today. It was a busy day. And huge thank you to our moderators, Bob C. Chokin and the Orb, and Chuck Diesel, and Dorian Sapiens, A Difficult Truth, Nightbot, Our Means, Nug Wrangler, all you guys over at Twitch. Thank you very, very much. And remember, once we hit that sub level, I'm going to play a game on Twitch. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to play a game. All right, guys, we will see you tomorrow, same time, same place, 3 p.m. Eastern. Stay in solidarity. Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.